Shalom, family. Good to see you all here. Hope you're doing well. Well, we're going to talk about a topic that came up on Tucker Carlson show. He interviewed Mike Huckabee. And right now, Israel is upset with both of them over this interview, but they're exceptionally mad at Tucker Carlson and the things that he said, and you'll get a clear understanding why. So the question is, who are the children of Abraham? Who are his offspring? And they were talking about, and Tucker said, why don't we just do a DNA test to find out who are the real offspring of Abraham? And we know in Israel it is forbidden to do a DNA test for very obvious reasons. So Mike Huckabee they were going back and forth with this whole thing, and you'll see it in a lot more detail. Ladies and gentlemen, they'll never permit no DNA tests because everything will go straight out the window. And there are people on this planet that want to keep that information in the dark forever. And they're fully aware. Even during the time of chattel slavery, they knew who was who, even back then. They knew. And they know now. But if they can keep it under wraps so it never ever gets out, or, they had a close call, if y'all remember, during that time when all that stuff exploded about Kyrie Irving and him sharing that link from Hebrews to Negroes. And that just exploded, not only here, but worldwide. And when that occurred, it was a close call for them because remember, they were calling for Amazon to take it down and everybody that had it to take it down. But Amazon refused. People were buying the books, people were buying the movie, the documentary. And I bought everything. I bought everything. I bought the books, I bought the documentaries, I bought everything. And the chatter was really kicking up then about who was the real Hebrews. And I was seeing not only our folks going on videos talking about this, but there were a lot of white people saying it only makes sense that it's the people, we thought were just black people. It only makes sense that it's them. So they didn't like that. They didn't like that. They wanted everybody to shut up about it. And when I say that thing went worldwide, y'all, there were people overseas even ordering the books and watching the documentary on who the real Hebrews were. And I know many of you remember that. I remember it. I did several live streams and videos on that. I really got into it because, spiritually, I believe that was the time for the first wave of that announcement to go worldwide. And it's going to occur again. It is. It's coming. These things are not coming up for no reason. It's coming up for a reason. And there's a reason why it's being talked about among Gentiles. So let's get into it. I want y'all to hear this interview, and I want you to hear how a lot of our people responded. I was really shocked at how many of our people knew of this interview. Boy, we're really on top of our game out here on social media. Oh man, I love it. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All right. Please give me a 1 if you can see my screen. Thank you.
Abram's descendants are the ones who have the right to have this land, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we do genetic testing on everybody in the land and find out who Abram's descendants are? It's really simple. We've cracked the human genome. We can do that. Why don't we do that? Would you be against doing that?
I have no idea what that would prove. I mean,
Really?
maybe it would be.
What do you mean? It would prove who Abram's descendants are and who has a right to live here and who doesn't, according to the theology that you yourself just explained. And so I'm very confused as to why we don't do that. If you believe the theology that you've just explained to me,
Would we do that all over the world?
well,
And everybody
this is the
would
only
would
country in the
Brits-
world that you've said has this covenant with God, that this people have a moral and legal right to the land.
But there are people who may not have bloodlines, but who have converted to Judaism. Are they going to be able to live here? Are you going to kick them out?
By your standards, they can't live here
No,
because
I've
you've just
never
told
said-
me
no,
that they
no.
have a right to live here because God gave them the land because they're the descendants of Abram.
They're the descendants of Abraham. But if they're the spiritual descendants of Abraham and they've now decided that they're converting to Judaism, then do they have a right to live in Israel?
Since you began this conversation by asking me, did I think they had a right to come here?
Yeah, that's
And
what
my
Zionism
question
is.
was, on what basis do they have the right?
Yeah.
And
And I
you
tried
said
to-
because God granted it to
Yeah,
them.
and I also said because that there should be a land where Jews can live in peace and safety.
And I asked you what a Jew was, and you couldn't answer it. You said
I didn't
it partly is religious, but doesn't have to be. It's partly genetic, but it doesn't have to be. And so that you can see why I'm confused.
I think I was very clear.
Bibi's family, we know they lived in Eastern Europe. There's no evidence they ever lived here. He's not religious.
But
in what sense?
but
How do we know
ancestrally,
that? Do you have his family tree? No, we don't.
do you?
He doesn't. So
Well,
no one does. That's the point.
but
So
if
how do
there
we
is-
know that he
but
has any
if they
connection
are
to this land at
Jewish,
all?
And if there has been a practice of Judaism and a connection to the language,
But
the
he
Bible,
doesn't-
the land,
His ancestors didn't. He doesn't practice Judaism in any rigorous way. His ancestors didn't live here. They didn't speak the language, and there's no evidence they ever lived here. So in the territory that Israel controls today, particularly in the West Bank, who through genetic testing, we can know their families have been here for thousands of years. We don't know whether they practiced Judaism, whether they were Samaritans, pre-Islam. We don't know that. A lot of them we know have been Christians for 2,000 years. They have less of a right to the land than someone whose ancestors, the only thing we know about them is they lived in Latvia or Poland. They're Eastern European. How does that work?
decision. Okay. That's why they gave away
so
Gaza.
They gave away the Sinai.
Now's the part
They've
for
given
the
away
real
a
lot
question.
of things.
Abram's descendants are the ones who have the right to have this land, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we do genetic testing on everybody in the land and find out who Abram's descendants are? It's really simple. We've cracked the human genome. We can do that. Why don't we do that? Would you be against doing that?
I have no idea what that would prove. I mean, maybe it would be.
What do you mean? It would prove who Abram's descendants are and who has a right to live here and who doesn't, according to the theology that you yourself just explained. And so I'm very confused as to why we don't do that. If you believe the theology that you've just explained to me,
would we do that all over the world?
Well,
and everybody
this is the only country in the world that you've said has this covenant with God, that this people have a moral and legal right to the land.
What about people who convert to Judaism? Would they have a right?
Well, you've just, You've just said,
I mean,
that
there are
it's not
converts to Judaism, so
you just told
they
me,
can make Aliyah. They may not have
you've just
DNA.
told me that it doesn't matter. You told me moments ago, trying to keep track,
Okay.
that it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in God or whether or not you practice Torah Judaism or Rabbinic Judaism, which is something else that I don't even know if we should, I don't even know what that means, but it doesn't matter whether you're, quote, a religious Jew or not. What matters is that you are part of the Jewish people to whom God gave this land that extends from the Nile to the Euphrates. And so if you believe that, wouldn't you want to know with a burning passion who those people are? And because of science, we can now know who those people are. So why aren't we finding out?
I guess you could propose a DNA test for everybody who comes here.
But the second question is every bit as pressing, which is who are the people? Who are the modern? Yes, who are the descendants? So we know, and I believe, and I agree with you as a Christian, that God promised this land from modern day Iraq to modern day Egypt to this people, the Jews, to Abram's, actually not to Abram's descendants, as it says in Genesis 15. Who are his descendants now, and how do we know who they are? I think.
Now, that is the question. And the answer to that question is the greatest conspiracy cover-up of the last 500 years. And Tucker Carlson, using his platform, interviewing Mike Huckabee, who is a Christian Zionist who supports the existence of the state of Israel, for him to ask this question to Mike Huckabee now establishes it as a legitimate question that needs to be considered in the mainstream. And as Christians and Bible believers all over the earth begin to ponder this question, inevitably they are going to have to arrive at the answer which the Bible gives us, that the lost 12 tribes of the nation of Israel today are so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native American Indians, who are the children or the descendants of the diaspora of North, Central, and South America and the transatlantic slave trade. And this is what the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge has been teaching since 1969. There's a sect of Christian, conservative, Bible believers who maybe don't know the answer to the question, where are the descendants of Abraham today? Who are those children of Israel or those Jews in the earth today? But what they do accept and what they know they can prove is that the people in the Middle East today are not those people.
So the current prime minister's ancestors weren't from here within recorded history. He has no deed. Bibi Netanyahu, on one side, his family's from Poland. They're from Eastern Europe. So how do we know that he has a connection to the people who God promised the land to, Abram's descendants? How do we know that? Abram's descendants are the ones who have the right to have this land, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we do genetic testing on everybody in the land and find out who Abram's descendants are? It's really simple. We've cracked the human genome. We can do that. Why don't we do that? Would you be against doing that?
I have no idea what that would prove. I mean, maybe it would be.
What do you mean? It would prove who Abram's descendants are and who has a right to live here and who doesn't, according to the theology that you yourself just explained. And so I'm very confused as to why we don't do that. If you believe the theology that you've just explained to me.
Would we do that all over the world?
Well,
and everybody
this is the only country in the world that you've said has this covenant with God, that this people have a moral and legal right to the land.
But there are people who may not have bloodlines, but who have converted to Judaism. Are they going to be able to live here? Are you going to kick them out?
By your standards, they can't live here.
No,
you just told me that they have a right to live here because God gave them the land because they're the descendants of Abram.
They're the descendants of Abraham. But if they're the spiritual descendants of Abraham and they've now decided that they're converting to Judaism, then do they have a right to live in Israel?
Since you began this conversation by asking me, did I think they had a right to come here?
Yeah, that's
what my question was. On what basis do they have the right?
And
you said because God granted it to them.
And I also said because that there should be a land where Jews could live in peace and safety.
And I asked you what a Jew was, and you couldn't answer it. You said it partly is religious, but doesn't have to be. It's partly genetic, but it doesn't have to be. And so that you can see why I'm
I think I was very clear.
BB's family, we know they lived in Eastern Europe. There's no evidence they ever lived here. He's not religious.
But ancestrally,
Do you have his family tree? No, we don't.
do you?
He doesn't. So no one does. That's the point.
But
So
if
how do
there
you
is-
know that he
but
has any
if they
connection
are
to the descendant
Jews,
at all?
And if there has been a practice of Judaism and a connection to the language, the
And he
Bible, the land,
His ancestors didn't. He doesn't practice Judaism in any rigorous way. His ancestors didn't live here. They didn't speak the language, and there's no evidence they ever lived here. So in the territory that Israel controls today, particularly in the West Bank, who through genetic testing, we can know their families have been here for thousands of years. We don't know whether they practiced Judaism, whether they were Samaritans, pre-Islam. We don't know that. A lot of them we know have been Christians for 2,000 years. They have less of a right to the land than someone whose ancestors, the only thing we know about them is they lived in Latvia or Poland. They're Eastern European. How does that work? Certainly it goes to motive. I was attempting to set up a meeting, as I have been for the past 3 months, with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who I've dealt with all.
Y'all, I want you to listen real closely to this part because Tucker Carlson is raising this point. He's getting threats from Israel. I'll just listen closely to what he says. They're threatening him and his family. All right, let's get back to it.
A lot in the past, and who denounced me as a Nazi in public, a member of the woke Reich. And why was I trying to do that? Not an interview. I knew he wouldn't sit for an interview, but I wanted just to meet with him in person. One, to show that I'm willing to go to Israel. I don't hate Israel as a country. But two, just to say directly to him, this is bad. This should be de-escalated. This kind of rhetoric doesn't help anybody. Calling me specifically, a Nazi and an anti-Semite when you know that I'm not. By the way, if I was, I would just admit it. I've said many times I think anti-Semitism is immoral. It's against my religion, just as hating any group on the basis of their bloodline is immoral. And so I really pushed hard for this meeting, and I called a lot of people who know him and who are in regular contact with him. In fact, I went to go see some of those people directly. Please, can you help me get a sit down for 5 minutes with Benjamin Netanyahu? And I probably called or met with 6, 7, 8, maybe more people on this question. People in official capacities, people in the Israeli government. I know a number of people in the Israeli government, people in Israel, a friend of mine in California who knows him. I mean, I really, really tried. And I did so for 2 reasons. One, because there was a threat to my family. The Israeli government and Netanyahu himself tried to punish 2 members of my family. I won't be more specific, but actually punish 2 members of my family because he has said in public many times, believes in blood guilt, Amalek. You know, when someone commits a crime against you, you punish not just him, but his family, his bloodline. There's no idea that's less Western than that, more anti-Christian than that. Christians reject that. Netanyahu doesn't. That's why he's talking about Amalek. And he was going after my family, literally. So I felt very threatened by that. But moreover, I think it's bad for my country to have people using that kind of language. Round them up, bring them to the camps, gas chambers, Nazis, anti-Semitism. It scares the heck out of people. It makes people crazy and hysterical. And certainly in my case, none of that is true. I hate collective punishment. I hate attacking people on the basis of their bloodline. I hate anti-Semitism and anti-white racism and all of this, or any kind of racism, period. And I've said that a lot. So using that kind of language against someone who is not fundamentally your enemy, who just, in my case, I want Christians in areas controlled by Israel to be treated with dignity, to have rights. And I don't want the U.S. government involved in a war, a regime change war with Iran. Those are my priorities, and I've said them out loud. I have no secret agenda. So to attack me as a Nazi for saying that suggests a total unwillingness to compromise. You know, anyone who doesn't agree with us 100% must be destroyed. His family must be attacked, my family, and must be written off as a Nazi. Well, when you do that, it makes people hysterical. It increases the temperature to a point that, someone's going to get hurt if you keep talking that way. And it's just bad. It's bad for the United States. It's bad for the world. So I wanted to deliver that message.
So check out this interview with Tucker Carlson and Mike Huckabee about who the real Jews are.
Netanyahu's parents did not speak Hebrew. Okay. They didn't live in this region. Netanyahu, the founders of this country, were mostly secular. Some of them were avowed atheists. They were not praying for the peace of Jerusalem. They weren't praying at all because they didn't believe in God. There's no genealogy linking their families to the people of this land 3,000 years ago. They're none. So how do we know, since they didn't share a language, they didn't share a religion, they had no religion whatsoever, how do we know that they had a right to come here from Eastern Europe
but they were
take
scattered.
the land?
They were scattered
I
to
understand
Eastern Europe.
that.
They were scattered all over the world. There were many in Ethiopia. They were in Russia. They were in Poland. They were throughout Asia. Jews were all over the
I
place,
know
but they were
that.
still Jews. But they were still
In
Jews.
1969, I asked UPK, I've been teaching the truth of this Bible. The real Jews went into slavery on cargo slave ships. That's Deuteronomy 28. The real Jews discontinued their heritage and their culture, and they served thine enemies. That's Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 4. Ultimately, you can make your conclusion about who's who, but there are only one group of people on the planet that fulfill the curses in the Bible, and that's Blacks, Latinos, and Native American Indigenous. The people listed right here on this picture behind me, all still scattered in a land that was not their own, speaking a language that was not their own, scattered across the entire world by way of cargo slave ship, serving their enemies.
I just watched this video of Tucker Carlson talking to Mike Huckabee about Israelis and Jews and Bibi and what right do Jews have to the land of Israel? What right does Bibi have to the land of Israel? If Bibi's grandparents, great-grandparents were from Poland, what right does he have? Netanyahu was born in Israel. Over 80% of Israeli Jews were born in the state of Israel. So even if you want to make this anti-Zionism, anti-Zionist argument that Jews are not originally from the land of Israel, or that people who identify as Jews today are not originally ancestrally from the land of Israel, even if you want to make that argument, 80%, 81% of Israeli Jews were born in the land of Israel. And there is no other country, no other place in the world where you will say that people do not have the right to be and live in the land they were born in. If Bibi does not have a right to be an Israeli, to live in Israel, because his grandparents are from Poland, then in what world does Tucker Carlson or any American have the right to be American? I'm visiting in the US right now. I was born in the US. Is my ancestral line from the US? No. We've been here for 120 years. Less than 120 years. 1909 to 2026. Almost 120 years. My ancestry going back hundreds of years was not in North America. I have no indigenous American ancestry that I'm aware of. And yet I was born in the US. I have US citizenship, like the vast majority of Americans whose ancestors, whether they are Black Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, European Americans, very, very few of us have any ancestral rights to this land. If you want to say that you only have the right to a land because that's where your ancestors were from. So very clearly, very obviously, anyone who knows history, the Jewish people in all of its diversity, its roots, Judaism, Hebrew, Jewish law, Jewish culture, Jewish holidays, Jewish identity, all comes from the land of Israel historically. And every Jewish community, every Jewish person in some way, whether they are descended from people that came from the land or those who converted throughout history, all Jews in a way have a connection to the land of Israel. And for those who just converted, Judaism as a culture, as an identity, is an ethno-religious identity. It is a You could say in English, a tribal identity. It comes with religion and culture. It's an ethnicity that people can join, okay, and marry into. So even if you just convert yesterday, you're a part of a people whose roots, whose origin is in the land of Israel, in historic Palestine, period. But even if you don't want to accept that, you can't make an argument that Israeli Jews don't belong in the land of Israel or in Palestine when Israeli Jews, the vast majority of them, were born there. If you are born somewhere, whether you are Israeli or you are Palestinian, you belong there. Bibi was born in Israel. 81% of Israeli Jews were born in Israel.
You've appealed to Genesis 15.
Like the Palestinians.
Man, Tucker Carlson done put them boys on the spot. Do the DNA test. Prove you where you supposed to be. That boy froze up, boy. Hey, he put him on the spot, didn't he? They ain't want to do it. They ain't want to do it. And in case y'all didn't know, that country over there that's on everybody's shit list right now, they have a law to where nobody over there can do DNA testing. Nobody over there can, it's against law for them to do that. And if they could prove that they actually supposed to be on this land, why wouldn't they just do it to shut everybody up and end the conversation forever? But they won't do it. And you even got a law put in that said that nobody's allowed to do it. What are you hiding? What are you hiding? Yeah. Tucker Carlson put that boy on the spot. He ain't know what to say. I don't understand. Yeah, you understand. Either the question was plain as day. You understand. And me no speak any English. Look at ass nigga. But yeah, they on the hot seat. Things is shaking up. Boy, y'all see what's going on in Mexico? Boy, they shut that motherfucker down and they Cancun is ours. Boy, they goddamn shooting the broad daylight, everything on fire. Yeah, if y'all don't understand that we might be witnessing the crumble. We might be witnessing the crumble, y'all, of all this bullshit. And I've said it once, I'll say it again. It all must fall for it to change so that we can get better. What do I know? Street.
And that's exactly right. That's the whole purpose in me showing you this, because I want you to see, in order for this, because this just went mainstream, y'all. Okay, Tucker Carlson, that's mainstream. And let me tell you something. It is the beginning of taking down these old systems, these systems that have been lying to us the entire time. It's the beginning. Look at what he put out there. They are fuming mad at Tucker Carlson. And if you go online, they're mad at Mike Huckabee too, for the things he said in the interview. But they're really mad at Tucker, especially raising the DNA, because they made it so it's forbidden to do one. So now people got more questions than answers on this whole thing. And it is the beginning of everything falling apart. It really, truly is. This is not going to go away, y'all. This is going to come up again. Whether it comes up again with Tucker and other interviews, or other people raising the questions about who's really in that land and making all these claims, it's coming up again. This is not going away. That's why they're threatening him, because they see the threats always worked before in the past. You know, I even remember back when the stuff was going on with Kyrie Irving, they were coming in my comment section. Black people are not the Jews. Black people, you think I'm going to listen to you? You think I'm listening to you? So, look, y'all, all that stuff that went on with Kyrie Irving was just a few years ago. And here we are a few years later. And this stuff is being raised back in the media once again. Pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to how, yeah, it's very confusing with everybody with all these different points of views, but the bottom line is it's coming up again. And see, these folks think they're just having these conversations among each other. Oh no, the Most High is very much involved in what's going on, just like he was very much involved when Hebrews to Negroes was getting a lot of recognition and all the chatter was going on about who's real Hebrew, who's the real Hebrews. Well, that's happening again. It's happening again. So, yes, they're in fear of their world falling apart. That's what all the threats on him are about. So, Pensy Lola, Yah bless. Thank you so much for the super chat. Always edifying teaching. Thank you for your support for my channel. And again, thank you for yet another super chat. This ain't play family. Absolutely not. Again, thank you for your support for my channel. Oh no, it's not. Look at the times we're in. And this is coming up at this moment once again. Yeah, and these people, they feel threatened. Truth be told, thank you so much for the super sticker and your support for my channel. So, we're just going to sit back like we have all this time, and we're just going to watch the festivities, and it's going to be quite a show, y'all. It's going to be quite a show. So, y'all, please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I might be back a little later with something else because I was going to speak on what's going on in Mexico. Boy, it is crazy. Things are burning in Mexico in 8 different states over there. And see, they want this war to spill over into the US. And the reason why they do is because apparently, and this is what I was able to find out reading the news stories online, something Gavin Newsom claimed, we don't read. Mexico, when they took out that cartel, they took them out based on US intelligence. The US apparently pinpoint where he was in order for Mexico to go in there and take him out. So that's why they said the war is against Mexico and the US. Right now, the border is closed. The border is closed. So how long it's going to be like that, I don't know. That's why all the attacks are within Mexico, but they are vowing to come after the US as well. So that's where it stands. So, I will gather some information and maybe we will get into that a little more later on this evening. So, everybody have a wonderful afternoon. Shalom, family.